Hey, Bernie Sanders, it's me, Random Rants. I just wanted to reach out to you to let you know why you're losing this race. First off, let's start with this. You're not Joe Biden. People know Biden, but they don't really know you. They don't really know you. Let me elaborate. Joe Biden was the last Democratic vice president. People know his face. They know his voice. He sounds like a standard politician. He looks like a standard politician. Now, while Barack Obama wasn't a great president at all, people still think of his administration as the one that helped them get through the financial crisis in 2008. They think of his administration as the one that finally got bin Laden. They think of the administration that gave them the Affordable Care Act. They think of his administration when they think back to what was relatively a peaceful and stable 8 years. So Joe Biden was a part of that administration. Despite the fact that Joe Biden is a demonic, racist monster who's done everything he can to destroy this country, from enacting laws that targeted poor people to trying to steal the Social Security money of this country's citizens for his own financial gain, people still think back to those 8 years when Obama was in office when they see Joe Biden. But the same way the majority of people have seemingly forgotten about Biden's horrible past, they've also forgotten about your pretty good record pre the 2016 race. When they think of you, they think back to 2016 when you were fighting against Hillary Clinton for the presidency. And that's a problem. That's a problem because when they think of you, they think of every other politician. You campaigned about changing the country with some revolutionary ideas, but that's what every politician does. Every politician makes grand promises, says they're going to do one thing, but when they get elected, they do a 180, admit that they lied, and go about continuing to exploit the citizens who put them in office. So you talked about bringing change. And again, every politician talks about change because we all know that's what this system needs. It needs to change. Everyone in the country knows that. So when you talked about change but lost, let me correct that. When the Democratic Party stole the victory from you, ignored the votes of the citizens, and gave the nomination to Hillary Clinton, you didn't fight back. You didn't complain. Not only did you not fight back against that corruption, you went out and worked to help the corrupt nominee. When you did that, you basically showed people that you were like every other politician. You talked about changing the system, and then when the system cheats you, and it cheats us, you go and work for the same system that you told us needs to be changed. So did you really want to change the system? Or were you just a standard politician? So that means this race is just between two standard politicians. One's a Jewish guy with radical ideas that make stupid people think about McCarthyism. And the other is your standard WASP with facial and name recognition. Who'd you think people were going to pick? This is a race, or a contest, or a fight. Instead of fighting, you're constantly telling people how much of a friend Joe Biden is. Well, hell, now they want to be friends with Biden too. You didn't differentiate yourself. You needed to fight against the system. This system that you said needs to change. Instead of using your position to expose the corruption, you befriended it and work with it. So Americans don't know the real you. They just know you as a standard politician. Joe Biden's a standard politician, but he has all that recognition I was talking about earlier. You don't. So you're not Joe Biden, and you didn't fight hard enough to let Americans know who you really are. Second thing is this. You drew the wrong kinds of attention from the voters. First, I have to break down the two groups whose attention you needed to get. So in this country, you have a whole lot of people out there who could vote for you. Different races, ethnic groups, and classes. But because the people in power work to suppress the votes of so many, that pool shrinks a bit. People living in poorer communities are constantly having their votes suppressed, so unfortunately, they don't really count because our system is set up to literally not count their votes. Illegal immigrants can't vote, so they don't count. A good number of our older citizens are either too sick or too busy working to make ends meet, so they don't have the time to really pay attention to what's going on, so they don't count. And most young people are too busy enjoying their youth. or they're too stupid to pay attention to more important things, so most of them don't count. That leaves you with a smaller group. Older American citizens who have the time and energy to gather the facts about candidates and then vote, and younger people who are smart enough to pay attention to the world around them. These are the two groups. The economically stable older citizens of all races, we'll call them the old, and the smarter, more informed younger citizens of all races, and we'll call them the young. The old and the young. Or the young and the restless. No, never mind. I'll just stick with old and the young. So let's start off with the old. We have to come to terms with something that's really uncomfortable to talk about. And that's the fact that the older generation hates the younger generation. They're jealous of their youth, and they're envious that culture tends to revolve around younger people on this planet. TV shows, music, movies, and other things are normally made for younger people. Older people recognize this, and they hate the fact that they're no longer the center of attention. And so they start to hate the newer generation. And unfortunately, when the older generation starts hearing about anybody talking about changing the country so that it will benefit the next generation, the youngers, they subconsciously and consciously work to sabotage that. Why should young people have access to free healthcare, cleaner air, and an economically equal class system? The older generation didn't get to enjoy that, so they're going to make sure that the younger generation doesn't get to enjoy it either. I think that's something people don't really understand yet. The older generation always works to sabotage positive change because they're upset that they didn't get those benefits in their youth. So when you come out here talking about universal access to healthcare, free college, and a pollution-free existence, the older generation knows they'll be leaving this earth soon. And so if they vote for those things, it'll be the younger generation who gets to take advantage, not them. Now, of course, this isn't true of all of our older folk, but it's true of enough of them to sway an election. How many old people do you think care about you wiping away college debt or providing free college? None of them have that debt anymore, and they're all done with college life, so they don't care if it's free now. It wasn't free for them. What about this Green New Deal that promises to repair the environment and create new jobs? Every day, the older generation sits down to have breakfast with death. They don't really care about the environment at this point. They're about to die. And new jobs, if they're not retired already, they're definitely not thinking about getting a new job. What about health care? Well, they should all care about that, but there is one thing that is more important to the older generation than their own health, and that's racial hierarchy. The majority of our older white citizens are racist as hell. They hate niggers. They hate them even more than they hate the younger generation. And what's your record when it comes to blacks? Well, actual proven participation in the civil rights movement and endorsements from old civil rights leaders. Well, on top of that, you're also Jewish. That's one thing they hate almost as much as they're blacks. So you've had a history of helping blacks. Well, maybe. I mean, I guess all these years being around other politicians in our government, you've learned to stop speaking up for blacks. When you were younger, more principled, and had less to lose, you knew working to try and help blacks was the right thing to do. But like most white activists in this country, as you got older and started to accumulate more things, you realized that standing up for blacks in this country will only hurt you. The racist whites will shun and ostracize you for that, and you could end up losing your career. So I guess you figured out that you have to abandon blacks. I guess that's why you won't acknowledge that blacks in this country need to have their economic condition repaired. And I guess that's why, even though you marched for civil rights, you went along and signed Joe Biden's racist crime bill. You've either learned to accept and adopt racism, or you've learned that you need to ignore blacks in order to placate whites. But still, you're not Joe Biden. Old Joe's record of racism is well established, and he has a proven history of racism against blacks. He's known for his crime bill, a bill that was meant to target, imprison, and systematically dismantle the black community. He calls it Biden's Law. The older white generation know that. And I know it sounds bad, but they love it. Now, let's talk about the young. This one's a little trickier when it comes to the younger generation. You have almost all of their support. Almost, not all. Bernie, like I said earlier, you marched alongside other blacks to fight against the injustice practiced on the black citizens of this country. You know firsthand how this government works to systematically destroy the black community. You know firsthand how this country works to deny blacks a fair chance at acquiring an economic stability that is equal to that of whites. So when the black community came together to ask you about a plan that would help to repair all of those wrongs, a plan that worked towards giving us economic equality, you quickly dismissed it and told us that you helping us wasn't feasible. You outlined plans and policies of yours that you say will help everyone equally. But think about this. If the white community is only 2 steps from the top of the staircase, but blacks are all the way at the bottom of the staircase, then a plan to help everyone equally would help push the white community up to the top of the stairs, but only push the black community up to the 2nd step from the bottom. It won't change anything for us. It will only ensure that this country can still work against us because they still have the higher ground. So if you can't help us erase the inequality that we're fighting against, then why would we vote for you? Why vote for anybody? If the country has worked to destroy our community, then why don't we just sit back and watch the country destroy itself? We'll let the white community continue to vote against their own self-interest just to spite us. At least then, we'll all be equally impoverished. Not only did you dismiss the black community's request for help, you then constantly praise one of the men directly responsible for targeting our community. Every chance you get, you're constantly reminding us that the man that wrote Biden's law is your good friend. All right, we all got the message then. Helping the black community isn't feasible, and you're good friends with the people who've worked to destroy us. So if the younger black generation voted for you, they'd be just as dumb as the older black generation who's been voting for Biden. Voting against your best interests is one of the dumbest things you can do. So why would we vote for you? If it's not feasible for you to help us gain equality, then it's not feasible for us to help you become president. So you've lost a good percentage of the young vote, and this also feeds over into the old vote as well. Young whites will vote for you, and they'll try to spread your message to the older white generation. But as we discussed, the older white generation has no intention of voting for you. Young blacks will not be voting for you, since you don't want to help us. And now we have no reason to try and convince the older black generation to vote for you. So you've lost a good majority of the black vote. I guess getting our vote isn't feasible either. And the last thing is this. You've overestimated the people in this country. Americans are stupid. Laziness, jealousy, hatred, and racism are what drive their decisions. I wouldn't vote for you, Bernie. I don't know if you're a racist or just an out-of-touch old man, but as a black person, it would be against my best interest, and so I can't do that. But if I was white, I'd step over my mother to cast my vote for you. You have a track record of being honest, principled, and consistent, traits every leader should have. And I honestly trust that you mean what you say when it comes to your policy proposals. The fact that the media and the powers that be are fighting so hard to stop you from advancing is all the proof I need that you're up on the level. But Americans are too lazy to actually go out and seek real information about the nominees. They rely on propaganda pushing corporations to provide that for them. But unfortunately, these propaganda pushing corporations don't want real information getting out there, so the masses don't know the real you. Americans, like most people around the world, are jealous, and so they're more concerned with being higher than other citizens than actually making the world a better place. Americans are also filled with hatred, so they'll vote against their own best interests just to ensure that the people they hate are kept from obtaining a better life. And then you have the racism, the big key to this country's eventual downfall. It's really disgusting for me to watch this race because it once again shows just how racist the whites in this country are. Most of the people in the South are dirt poor. They have to work multiple jobs just to exist, or very difficult jobs just to exist. Big, white-owned companies are constantly working to deprive them of a better life by doing things like dumping poison in their drinking water, working to keep their wages low, working to raise their health care costs, pumping poison into their air supply, and working to keep them in debt. Bernie, most of the policies you're promoting will fix all of that. But because you participated in the civil rights movement in your youth, and because you're Jewish, and because you've been linked with a word that reminds them of the communist scare, they'll vote for anyone but you. Because the word socialism is worse than anything else on the planet, right? Same thing goes for the racists in other parts of the country. Everything about you screams the others. Marching with niggers, being a Jew, and talking about socialism. Because of that, Americans will vote against you. Hillary Clinton is just like Joe Biden, and you lost to her as well. And that's because she has a track record of being a racist and a bigot. So a good majority of whites around the country threw their support behind her because they like that kind of person. She reminds them of themselves. The only reason you did as well as you did against Hillary Clinton is because she's a woman, and the people would rather a man lead them, so they reluctantly chose her, but they did indeed choose her. If she was a man, she would have steamrolled you the same way Biden is doing now. Joe Biden may be a chemically imbalanced, incoherent imbecile, but he's what they know. He's what they're familiar with. So I guess it kind of goes back to the fact that you're not Joe Biden. Now, like I said, I can't support you because you dismiss the idea of supporting people that look like me. But I was rooting for you, and I've wanted you to win since 2016. But you're not going to win until you differentiate yourself from this system. You got to fight back. Expose Joe Biden and the corruption of this government. During your next debate, offer to sign a contract that promises that you will actually work to pass the policies that you're promoting. Present the contract during the debate and ask Biden if he'll do the same. At this point, all you have to do is just speak the truth. Stop pulling your punches. I mean, watching you at debates is like watching someone who's standing on their own lawn, watching their own house burn, and they're complaining about what caused the fire while holding a dripping water hose in their hand. You want to yell at the person, use the fucking water hose, you fucking idiot. It's not even difficult at this point. You just have to speak the truth and you can decimate your opponent, but you won't do it. You're even at press conferences saying you won't attack Joey because you don't want this to turn into something ugly. It's a fight, Bernie. Fights are ugly. Biden is showing early signs of dementia, and when asked about it, you refuse to even discuss the possibility that it may be dangerous for the country to pick someone whose mental faculties are deteriorating, or hell, even that rich people will choose our president for us by putting their person in as vice president, knowing that Biden will have to be replaced and eventually if he wins the nomination. You refuse to mention Biden's mental health, even though the media and the DNC is using all their financial power to attack your health. And this brings up one concern. This is your fight. It's a fight to determine whether or not you become the president. But you refuse to fight. So why should Americans believe that you'll fight for this country if you won't even fight for yourself? The policies you're proposing are very unpopular amongst the rich and the politicians that they employ, which means you're going to have a very hard time fighting to get them passed if you become president. But if you won't even fight for your own sake, then why should Americans believe that you'll be able to fight Congress to get these policies passed anyway? So is this all a waste of time? So when you lose this time, go back to your old job and don't just fall back in line. Be an actual leader. Go on television and expose politicians that take money and vote against the best interests of the American citizens. Stop acting like a standard politician, because if it comes down to just picking between two of the same old standard politicians, Americans will pick the one they're familiar with. And that's Joe Biden.